He was a drug-addicted line cook for much of his young adult life, and then all of a sudden becomes the most famous globetrotting food writer who's really ever lived.
If anybody asks, I'm not a writer. I work in a kitchen.
Sorry, what is your name?
Anthony Bourdain.
Tony. Why him? Why now?
I had no intention of making a movie about Anthony Bourdain. I didn't really know much about him. I'd seen one episode where he goes to Quebec with these two business partners who run a restaurant called Joe Beef.
Can I do that in a manly way?
And I had watched that maybe 8 times. I liked it so much. But that's the only Anthony Bourdain material I had ever seen. And it was meeting Dominic Sessa that made me think, I should make this movie. Because it was actually more something about Dominic than it was an interest in Anthony Bourdain that drew me into the project. There's something about him. I saw him and I was like, It wasn't like I was looking into a mirror, because we're actually extremely different, he and I. But he had the same perspective on issues that only now I'm starting to think about in my own childhood, specifically around role models and pretending to be an adult and lying, just like almost simple basic things. And it occurred to me that, this was a great opportunity for he and I to explore these things together.
So you found like a person to base a film around based on this actor rather than...
Yeah.
Right, so you found the character of Anthony Bourdain through Dominic.
Through Dom, yeah. And I think he and I found it together because Dom is from a town not far from where Bourdain himself grew up. And there's something about the way he carries himself. Bourdain as an adult becomes much more easygoing and well, charming. I mean, he becomes basically socially invincible by the time the world meets him. But if you look at photographs of him when he's young, or you hear stories, accounts of him when he's a kid, very, very different. Like, much more anxious, insecure. Well, I mean, he says himself, we use the quote at the beginning of the movie, that he was a thoughtless, angry young kid. And it just seemed like an interesting antidote to the persona that everybody knows, to show that this guy was a kid at one point, and that should give us all hope.
You know I can cook too.
The kid said he's a cook, chef.
I'm actually not a f***ing cook. I'm a writer, but I said I know how to cook.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
How did you come up with this version of Anthony Bourdain? Like, what was your material for
Well,
that?
he'd written a book
Yeah.
that detailed, not in specifics, but a fairly, like a survey overview of his time in Provincetown in 2 chapters at the beginning of Kitchen Confidential. And then on top of that, posthumously, so much had been written about him. There was an unauthorized biography. His assistant, Lori, had written an oral biography that interviewed all the people in his life, including his family members. And I myself moved to Provincetown to interview people who knew him at that time. And so between those 4 or 5 sources, it was, I won't say easy, but there was more than enough material to frame a movie around. Because really, he spent 3 summers there, and even beyond that, like, I was pulling from him at age like 15 to about him at age 25 and compressing all kinds of story details from a decade into that one movie. So the game I was playing with Dom really is, what is it in Anthony Bourdain's specific biography that we were curious about? Like, I would present all the different things that I'd found, or all the stories I'd heard, and then the things that he would react to or he would find interesting. I'd be like, okay, so that means this should be in the movie, that shouldn't be in the movie, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That part, like the plotting of it was not very difficult. It was like the specifics of what exactly is said, what happens. Like that was more complicated to figure out. But the broad strokes were
So like finding his voice was harder, or?
Well, no, because I had made the decision right away that his voice was going to be Dominic Sessa, and that was going to be it. Like, I told Dom to not even prepare, because Bourdain himself shows up in Provincetown not thinking he's going to become a world famous chef. He's in some ways intimidated and afraid. And so I wanted to keep Dom as close to that as I possibly could.
Because it is almost like he's such a huge character and huge influence on so many people's lives that it could be kind of daunting to go in and like try to...
I think we would have had a lot of baggage.
Right.
And I think it would have made the entire process, well, fraught, because I went through this exact same thing with Blackberry, where I was under a lot of pressure to make the story factually true, but spiritually false. What I find is that anytime you're taking like a real event or a real person and trying to tell a useful story about them. And I mean that very specifically, like a story that's going to be useful to a general audience where they can watch it and take something away from it. You really do not want to let the facts get in the way of the truth. And I could see clearly as soon as I started talking with people about it, there are fans of his that view him really as a dead saint. And right away that tells you, okay, be really careful, because it means certain people's expectations of this terrestrial man are going to be well beyond what an actual person can be on camera.
This guy, he's like a master chef.
And the world still so wild called to me.
We're gonna start with this special.
Every Friday, something fancy but not pretentious, something sexy.
Bourdain couldn't have started this movie as a saint and then ended the movie as a saint. Like, it never would have worked. And so the movie is trying to get at, I think, the more difficult, complicated parts of his childhood, his relationship with his mom, his relationship with his peers, and how he viewed himself entering the adult world, which is something that Dom and I really, really related to, and felt as though we almost had a conspiracy with Anthony Bourdain, the three of us. It was like, I think we can tell this story and make his life and legacy not more complicated necessarily, but more useful to the people who worship him. He didn't always have his superpowers. At one point, he was an awkward, shy kid, just like all of us were.
Do you think you learned anything about yourself diving into that?
Well, the goal was for both Dom and I to interrogate our own feelings about these very issues. So definitely. Now, can I articulate that? Probably not, but I couldn't really tell you what I learned from any of my movies, apart from the fact that they reflect me, and in doing that, change me. So every movie I've made, I come out like as a different person, but it'll be years before I know exactly how.
Okay, so I'll come back to you in 10 years with the same question.
Well, hopefully
We'll
less,
find
but
out.
yeah.
Hopefully
yeah.
less.
Yeah.
Maybe by the next film. And then you'll be ready to process this one when you're ready to go with that one?
Yeah, well look, that's when you know you're doing the right thing, is that every single movie challenges you, like psychiatrically. What I like about Bourdain's life, looking at it now that I've finished this film, is that a hidden message of his career is that just because you are 40 years old and you feel as though your life didn't become what you thought, does not mean that it's over. And I think there's deep wisdom in that, is that you can fail and fail and fail and fail and fail, and then all of a sudden become yourself.